Let's continue our look at the history of comics with Mama's Angel Child by Penny Ross, 1916, and then The Bear Creek Folks by Charles M. Payne, 1911. So these are comics 23 through 25 in the Smithsonian Book of Newspaper Comics. But first, let's look at the last couple of pages in the Annals of Comics from the Comic Book Encyclopedia. We have a couple of panels by Hogarth with some beautiful black work here. This great contrast of black and white. This is from Drago, 1946. We have BC by Johnny Hart. And then the last one is the Yellow Kid from Occult. And from what I can glean from this panel, the joke is the dog catcher came into the slums where the Irish and German immigrant children live, and the children fought back to keep their dogs. So there's the dog catcher. Looks like someone set fire to his thing, his wagon. Someone released the dogs. That's probably like a high class girl there with fans, and the upper class kids are laughing, and they're all making fun of the dog catcher because I guess the dog catcher's mean. Anyway, in the future, when I reference this book, it's going to be because it has an alphabetical listing of famous comic strips, about 420 of them. So I'll just say maybe a word or two about each comic, maybe point out a panel or something which is interesting. But mostly our focus is going to be on the Smithsonian Book of Newspaper Comics, because this provides some visuals. Now, I don't know really anything about Mama's Angel Child. Penny Ross, perhaps, I don't know if that's a nom de plume, but maybe this was done by a lady cartoonist. I'm not really sure. This is almost impossible to read. Of course, it was printed much larger originally. But here at the title we have Mama's Angel Child has a cubist nightmare in the studio of Monsieur Paul Vincent Cezanne von Goguen-Gonguin, which seems to be a combination of the names of many artists. Obviously Vincent. Cezanne is our Cezanne. There's Gonguin with an N. I think that may be Gauguin. I really can't read the dialogue, but the plot seems to be that it's just like Little Nemo. The child sees something in real life. In this case, not exactly like Little Nemo. It's cubism, and then she dreams where she enters a cubist world, and then things kind of get squirrely, and then she wakes up again at the end. So this is the second time when we've seen a female protagonist entering a dream world. In this case, the panels aren't unusual. It's what's in the panels that's unusual. I mean, this is very creative here. I also think it's interesting that we have a very limited color scheme. There's a whole lot that one can do with a limited color scheme. Obviously, we were familiar with just black and white. But, if we just add one or two colors to black and white, something can be very distinctive, very unusual, and very memorable. We actually saw that last time when we looked at Naughty Pete, where this only had, black, white, kind of an olive green, and kind of an off red. There may be two reds here. And that was a very memorable layout. One thing that's interesting about comics is that when I was going to school, comics were not considered art. They probably still aren't considered art. I did take some classes on art history and the like, and I did a lot of reading about art history. So I tried to use what skills I remember from that discipline and try to apply that to comics, because I think popular art is just as important, if not more so, than fine art. So just as a refresher, Cezanne, the real Cezanne, was not a cubist. That's not what the comic, of course, is implying, but just as a refresher, Cezanne, fruits and portraits. Gauguin, I believe he did exotic. Actually, some of these I probably can't show on YouTube. Kind of maybe overseas, kind of exotic places with unusual choices of color. I guess we could talk about fine art at another time. Bear Creek Folks by Charles M. Payne. I'm going to assume that these are Sundays, even though they are truncated. I don't know that for a fact. But, the division between Sunday and daily were not quite systematized yet. Newspapers were still experimenting during this time period. Something that's interesting about this is that we see the balloons are rectangular with just a line as the tail, which is a very old-fashioned way to do balloons. I like the shading for the tree. We don't have any tone paper like we would see in later comics or in present-day manga, so it's really just the black and the white. The story is just this man in a small town is bribing his way to be the mayor, and he gets caught. This is very interesting. I like the movement and the creativity here. We have a rickety train, a real tiny train. Well, it's basically a toy train. This reminds me of the Tunerville Folks, or the truck for what was that? Smoky Smoke Pipe, the fireman. It's almost Dr. Seussian in a way, and it's sort of like Wile E. Coyote, just sort of kind of the wild landscapes. Anyway, we are actually coming to the close of this first chapter, which is really the birth of comics. We have a few more pages to go, but next time we will be looking at School Days and Mutt and Jeff, and then really we will be moving into the 1920s. And I'll talk to you next time. Goodbye.